A lot of people are concerned about the integrity of our elections right now. I know there's a lot of concern around that. Keep in mind, a lot of the changes to election laws were done by bypassing the state legislatures. In a lot of these key states, the state legislatures are still controlled by Republicans. And again, you still have trials moving forward, different investigations into what happened with the elections. In Virginia, for example, you had this, right? In Virginia, for example, you had the analysis of the elections take place, and they determined that what was done in the 2020 elections was illegal, meaning that going forward, if different states actually do audits, if different states look into this, and many of them are, Virginia, uh, even some parts of New York, they actually overturned a House seat from a Democrat to a Republican because they deemed that the election was not done properly with one of the House elections. You have investigations being done in Arizona, notably two different ones, one in Maricopa County, one to the state Senate. The Maricopa County one has some holes in it. That's going to be the one very likely used in the big media narratives. The one to watch is the Senate audit in Georgia as well. And what does this mean? It means very likely that many states, not under Democrat control, can be flipped back to Republican because some of the areas that were won through the loosening of election regulations are going to be retightened. And very likely, if you put the checks and balances back in place, it means you have a better chance, right, of a fair election if there's checks and balances. And if Trump is working again as like the grassroots, voice to go in there and actually push things, you're likely going to have a lot of people go to the polls and vote. They have a strong shot at it. And Don Jr. saying Republicans need to fight back or they'll never win another election, which I know a lot of people feel right now as well. It's probably true, to be honest. All right. Now, on the note of Georgia, I'll go to this. Oh, real quick, Death's API, you're saying, it says carbon monoxide incident, but carbon monoxide doesn't cause an explosion. That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, CO, carbon monoxide. Yeah, well, this is on the manhole explosion again. You're noting that CO doesn't cause an explosion. Yeah, I'll keep you all updated on what we hear with this. It's breaking news, and so the degree, the level of information we have on it is too little to actually to really know anything going on right now. I'll keep you all updated if we hear updates on it. Now, this is from Epoch Times again. It says, Georgia prosecutor probing attempts to influence the 2020 elections. And this is important. Now, this is important because, as I mentioned, a lot of what we have going on with the elections, a lot of the lawsuits and so on, even if you're being told that, okay, so one of the big arguments you'll hear a lot of pundits noting and commentators noting, a lot of the mainstream media noting, is they'll say, oh, all of Trump's lawsuits failed. Judges declared that his evidence was bunk. There was nothing there. You're all a bunch of conspiracy theorists and insurrectionists, and should go be re-educated in the FEMA gulags or something like that, right? what they're essentially saying right now. I'm exaggerating a little bit. I'm actually not really, if you read some of their statements, but if you look into what actually happened, the challenges to the election, 2/3 of them have actually been successful. 2/3 of the challenges to the election have been successful. The ones where evidence was actually heard. And again, as I've mentioned, right? You do still have the Supreme Court set to hear cases, right? You have the Supreme Court set to hear cases on what happened in the 2020 election, lawsuits brought by Trump, his team, lawsuits brought by Sidney Powell, lawsuits brought by Lin Wood, right? And each of these, as we've mentioned before, all of this, going back to the early days of the challenges to the election, if we go back, as I mentioned, they were saying, and we'll have to see how it plays out, but technically, legally, this is how it would work, that any lawsuits filed prior to the Electoral College vote could still overturn the election. And maybe, as I've suggested last night, maybe this is why they want so badly to impeach Trump, because if the election is overturned based on the challenges to the election being brought to the Supreme Court, in which the Supreme Court is scheduled to hear coming up very soon. If it does overturn, it'll go to Trump. But what happens then if Trump is impeached? Well, it's uncharted territory. Who knows? They could say he can't be president because he's been impeached. And I suggested as well, maybe that's also why they waited. Maybe that's why they delayed the passing of the impeachment papers to the Senate, because maybe they wanted to wait till they had a supermajority. Maybe they wanted to wait till the Georgia elections until they knew they had the seats they needed to have the majority. It does seem to be the case, based on my analysis, that would be possible. Right? We can't say exactly what their intentions were, but it does make sense. Now, on this, back to this. This is what's happening in Georgia right now. It says a district attorney on February 10th asked state officials to preserve records potentially related to the 2020 election, as she revealed that her office has opened a probe into attempts to influence the administration of the election. It says the investigation includes, quote, potential violations of Georgia law prohibiting the solicitation of election fraud, the making of false statements to state and local government bodies, conspiracy, racketeering, violation of oath of office, and any involvement in violence or threats related to the elections administration. Fulton County District Attorney Fannie Willis, a Democrat, said in a letter to Republican Governor Brian Kemp and other officials. Important to note with this, it's basically the Democrats pushing back on this one. But by introducing this, saying potential violations of the law, essentially, for making false statements to state and local government bodies, conspiracy, racketeering, violation of oath of office, and any involvement in violence or threats related to election administration. If Georgia moves forward with that, you're very likely going to see this same thing happen in other states where the tables were turned and where Republicans were the ones facing those attacks, including threats against their lives. You might remember, even for example, Trump telling its administration to move forward with, basically affirming the transition to the Biden administration. That was being blocked, and the woman who blocked it, not only herself but even her family members and her children, were being threatened. You did have a lot of this. You even had some of the dueling electors who were blocked from entering to cast their votes, entering the government buildings to cast their votes in some states. The way a lot of this could be challenged, if the Democrats do choose to, try this battle, so to speak, out, the way this could be challenged in the way other states could respond to it, this could blow up in their faces, essentially. I'll keep you all updated on this as we go forward, of course. So I'm just checking out your comments. Be keeping updated as this goes forward, especially when it comes to what's happening now with the Supreme Court, because this is the big one to watch, and it seems to be the main story that nobody wants to talk about. All right, let's go into some other stories.